Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. I know it's been a while and I apologise, but I have been wanting to come back to YouTube for a little while and I just decided stop thinking about it and start doing it. So here I am. First things first, apologies for this. I am having a lazy, cozy day in. For context, when I'm filming this, it's Saturday, the 28th of December. I get 2 days off for Christmas. I was back to work yesterday on Friday for a full day, and my husband unfortunately has to work today, and I just decided this was going to be my chill out day. I got very little time to really sit, read over Christmas and Boxing Day, and I thought today would be the day that I could kind of chill out and do what I wanted to do. So I'm going to film a few videos and I'm just chilling out. So this is chill out. And if you don't like it, click off this video. This is just going to be the vibe for the next few because I'm going to sit down and film a few videos now whilst I've got a little bit of spare time. So I thought I'd come back with best books of 2024 because I thought this would be a really good way of seeing what I've read throughout the year and what I enjoyed throughout the year of what I read. As it stands at the moment, I'm 69 books in on my reading challenge and I am hoping to at least finish one more book before the end of the year. I've got time. I don't know with what I've got currently on the go whether I will get to 71, but I'd like to finish on 70 at least. So I know I'll get at least one more book finished before the end of the year. So I thought it would be fitting to just kind of talk about some of my top books of the year, look back across the year and let you know what I enjoyed, why I enjoyed it, if I can remember. These are in chronological order, so they're starting with the books that I finished earlier on in the year, running through to the books that I read most recently. And this year has been a bit of a weird reading year for me. I embarked on the 52 book challenge this year, which is basically 52 prompts that you have to fulfill across the year. I haven't completed it. If I go onto my Storygraph, 2024 was also the year that I started on Storygraph, albeit partway through the year and then had to kind of like backdate everything. I can't remember when I got Storygraph actually. I'm just going to go and have a look on my challenges on Storygraph and just see where I am currently at on the 52 book club. So I'm currently on 39 out of 52 prompts and I can't remember exactly when I decided to stop, but I did decide to stop. Cut long story short, I was just finding that it was really kind of pigeonholing my reading. I was reading for the sake of reading certain books to fulfill prompts and I just wanted to read what I wanted to read and I was finding I wasn't getting to everything I wanted to get to naturally. So I just decided to park it. I think it's a really fun challenge and I would recommend it to anybody. It just wasn't quite right for me for the whole year, but it was really fun to read some things that perhaps I wouldn't normally read, and it was a good start at the beginning of the year. It really got the momentum going at the beginning of the year with my reading. But yes, I mean, I may even find that come the end of the year, there might be a few more prompts that I can complete with books that I haven't used in the challenge. You know, there might be books that actually fitted prompts, but I will leave a link in the description box to the 52 Book Club website so you can see what it's all about. I do highly recommend it, but it wasn't quite right for me. I think if I read more if I read more books in a year, I think it would work better for me so I could have some balance between challenge prompts and then just kind of having a bit more freedom with my reading. But it was, like I say, it was a good start to the year. But I've read a real ton of just kind of contemporary romance this year, which I will be doing a goals video for 2025 whilst I'm sat down here at some point this afternoon. But I think there was a lot of that, and albeit a lot of the books I read I enjoyed in the moment, they're not like standout books to me, and I feel like there was not slim pickings, but there wasn't a great, like, amazing amount of books to talk about. So I have narrowed it down. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's a 9th book which I read on my Kindle, which I want to talk about as well. But let's just get cracking because I've already been talking for 5 minutes and I've not even talked to you about a single book yet. So, the first book I want to talk about is The Phone Box at the Edge of the World by Laura Amai Messina. Sorry if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. This was actually a book that was in my book club. I'm part of a in-person book club, and this was one that was chosen, and it was one that we all read and we all really enjoyed. The kind of topics of this book are really about grief, and how everybody deals with grief differently, and kind of overcoming grief, learning to live with grief and loss, and then how things kind of like how you continue your life, basically. This has quite a almost like a kind of magical element to it in a sort of odd sense, but it's not explicitly magical. But this is it's inspired by a true story. On a windy hill in Japan, in a garden overlooking the sea, stands a disused phone box. For years, people have travelled to visit the phone box, to pick up the receiver and speak into the wind, to pass their messages to loved ones no longer with us. So the main character loses her mother and daughter in the tsunami. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name because I think I'm going to pronounce it wrong. She wonders how she will carry on. One day she hears of the phone box and decides to make her own pilgrimage there to speak to the people she loved the most. But when you've lost everything, the right words can be the hardest to find. She meets Takeshi, a bereaved husband whose own daughter stopped talking in the wake of their loss. What happens next will warm your heart, even when it feels as though it is breaking. I just feel like this was really... it was really emotional, but it was also really kind of comforting to read. And I think that maybe somebody that's going through a loss or has been through loss in the past, I think this might be really healing for you to read. And it was just a really, really lovely book. And I think it was done really well. And some of it was just the way it was told as well. With some of these chapters and just little kind of asides. I don't know if I'm describing this eloquently enough, but anyway, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend if you like some more kind of like Asian contemporary literature. The next book on the list is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. I think the best way to describe this was I had an actual emotional response to this. I sobbed my eyes out when I read this. And it was a little while ago that I read this, so I might be a little bit rusty with most of these books, to be fair. But this is about a college student. I think she's always had a thing for somebody, but it's never been reciprocated. I think maybe a brother's friend or something like that. There's a new man in her life, not afraid to go after what he wants. And then I believe there's a storyline, if I'm remembering correctly. Seems really weird to be talking about the best books of 2024 and then not being able to remember them. But then there's an incident and the main character has amnesia and can't remember everything that's happened. And this just completely gripped me. And it is a kind of sports college romance, but it felt so much more at the time that I was reading it. And it really was like, it really got me in the feels. I literally sobbed. And I have got the second book, which I think is called like Promise Me Not or something like that. I have got that on my radar and I have got that physically to read at some point in 2025. But I really enjoyed this. Highly recommend. The next one is a little bit different and again was a book club pick. And the reason why this was picked for the book club was because this is actually set in the area that I live in. This is set in Sussex. It's set in a little town in Sussex, and it is a World War II story. We follow a main character called, is it John Cook? Yes, John Cook. He's ex-army. I think he's ex-forces from the First World War, and he is living his life in Sussex and obviously we're in the Second World War, and I don't think he'd get clearance to sign up. But what is really interesting is this is kind of like entrenched in my local area that I live in. And the author, Stephen Ronson, doesn't live in this country anymore. He actually lives in Canada now. But he grew up in that town as well. And that was how he came, that's how our book club came to kind of find out about it. It's a really, really, I think for anybody that lives in the local area would really enjoy it. But it's also a really good tale of war, but war is often, I think, depicted in literature in major cities or in kind of quite a niche like little box, and I don't think maybe some of the more rural areas or the areas that weren't necessarily affected by the Blitz and things like that, those city centres that were maybe bombed and things, I think some of the kind of those sorts of stories don't necessarily always get told. It's all fictional, but it is, I just think it was a really good story. And the second one is out. I haven't read it yet, but highly recommend this if you're into World War II fiction and you like the idea of the Sussex countryside. I really liked it because I have only known this particular town, since it's been like bypassed and modernised because of my age. But with the age range in the book club, when we discussed it, people were kind of trying to tell me where they thought things were, and we actually got to meet the author. He came to the book club, and I also met him when the paperback was released, and he signed and personalised my copy. And I bought like 3 copies, one for me, one for my dad, and one for my boss at work, my work dad. And they were Father's Day gifts. But yeah, I highly recommend this to anybody that likes World War II fiction, or kind of a little bit more sort of, it's dubbed like the Jack Reacher of World War II. So if you like something a little bit more thrillery like that, I highly recommend it. Now, this next one is completely different to the one I've just told you about. But 2024 was the year that I read Binding 13. I have read this year all of them bar Taming 7. I haven't read the final book that I think was released this year, Taming 7. But I've read the Binding 13, Keeping 13, Saving 6 and Redeeming 6. I've read all of them. And this is kind of like a kind of like play setter for the whole series. I loved this, and I loved Keeping 13. I think these ones are my favourite. My only criticism with Saving 6 and Redeeming 6 is that I felt they were really old for the age of the characters. I felt like the story was older than the characters really were, if that makes any sense. But Johnny and Shannon just, these books just broke my heart. Ripped it out, stomped all over it, and then kind of maybe just kind of got it back in there and like sort of hastily stitched it back up. These were amazing, so harrowing, really, really emotional, and just, I did feel, albeit this spoiler, this book ends on a cliffhanger. Albeit that this kind of ended on a cliffhanger, I went straight into the second one. I needed a break after I finished these 2 because they were tough. The subject matter is really tough. You're following a young girl called Shannon who lives in a very challenging environment, and Johnny, who lives in a very kind of different environment with very different family and home life. And Johnny is on the rugby team. He's number 13, and basically Shannon has had trouble at school. She transfers to the new school, which is private, and her mum has like taken on a loan and extra hours at work to make it happen so that she can go there, so she can avoid the bullies. And it's just everything, basically. Obviously, check trigger warnings on this one. There's a lot of potentially triggering stuff in this. I found it really heavy on me. These books, found them quite heavy. But then when I read Saving 6 and Redeeming 6, I didn't find that as heavy, and I think it was because it's a little bit more disconnected from some of the harrowing stuff that goes on in this one, albeit that those two were harrowing in their own way. But I have still got Taming Seven to read, and I'm hoping to get to that in 2025. But yes, again, highly recommend. Something a little bit lighter. I read the, what is this called? The Rebel Blue Ranch series. Yes, I think so. I read all of these books this year. So Done and Dusted, Swift and Saddled, and the one that's just been released, Lost and Lassoed. I read them all this year and just really, really enjoyed them. They were really light, easy, but with kind of realistic themes, realistic storylines, things that are a little bit more real than just everything be fluffy and perfect. And they were just, they're short, all available on Kindle Unlimited. And they were just, in the moment, exactly what I needed each time I picked one of them up. And I think because we as humans have emotions and hormones and everything, sometimes we just need something that's just the right fit, and it doesn't necessarily even need to be like any explanation to it. It was just, each time I read one of these books, it was just exactly what I needed. It was the lighter, easier read, and each one was brilliant. And I love Rebel Blue Ranch. Very similar in some respects to the Chestnut Spring series. If you've read that and you've liked that, I highly recommend these. And almost a similar dynamic as well with some of the kind of way that the family is structured, but highly recommend these, and think that you should head out and read them if you haven't already. They are available at the works and they're really cheap as well, so worth picking up if you haven't. And like I say, they are on Kindle Unlimited. And the next one, Powerless by Lauren Roberts, is I think the first kind of slightly more fantastical book that I've put on this list. It definitely is, isn't it? Yeah. This was probably the first book that I read this year that was of this kind of ilk that really grabbed me and really kind of, like I say, I read a lot of romance, contemporary romance this year, and this was the first book that I kind of picked up that was more fantastical, and it just completely consumed me. I was right in with the story. I was really intrigued with how everything worked in this world, and I just ate this up. Then read the second one, the little novella, and then when Reckless was released, also read that as well. It was had very kind of Under the Mountain from ACOTAR, Hunger Games vibes. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the kind of series of games, and enjoyed kind of having a character a little bit sort of like Selena from Throne of Glass-esque, you know, someone a little bit more of a pauper, someone from a more deprived background. You know, we love that. But then the element of the games, the relationships with the character, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I just really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this. And it was what I needed. It needed to kick me back into my, oh look, I can actually read fantasy. I don't just have to read romance, and I can get hooked on something. I think by this point I was kind of I was really looking forward to Onyx Storm being released in 2025, and I think I needed something to remind me that I can read stuff that's from other worlds and not just contemporary worlds, if that makes sense. But yeah, enjoyed this, highly recommend. And it's definitely got me thinking more on what I'm reading and trying to read a bit more in this sort of subgenre of fantasy romance sort of esque, if you get my drift. Everyone just seems to be releasing so many books this year, because I read Elsie Silver's both Wild Love and Wild Eyes. I liked Wild Love, but it wasn't my most favourite book. I read that whilst I was in Tenerife earlier on in the year in April. I think it was quite newly released at that time. But I read Wild Eyes when this was released, and it just hit different. Again, I don't know if that's a me thing, but I just loved this. I loved the single dad trope. I think all of the books in this series are going to have a single parent in them, I think. My feet have gone to sleep, sorry, I'm sat on the floor with my legs crossed. I think all of them are going to have single parent tropes, single parent vibes in the dynamics, but this one was just brilliant. I love the idea of the main character, what was her name, Skylar, being like a high-flying country singer and being a really popular person, like popular in her field, and kind of coming into an environment where she's not and she's just herself. I just really like that. I love music, I love singing, I love kind of the idea of her coming to somewhere else and kind of getting her groove back and getting her voice back and getting her sound back, if that makes sense. I just really love this. And the parrot was amazing. I think I listened to this on audiobook and I loved it. And this was just brilliant. Brilliant. And this one's got me really excited for the next one, because this ended and I was like, need the next one. And I have pre-ordered that for 2025. There's only 2 more to go. I'm sorry this video is so long. But the next book on my list of best books for 2024 was The Rose Garden by Susanna Kearsley. This was one of the ones that when I was in my real strong Outlander phase, which I still am, by the way, I still love Outlander, but I wanted everything I read to be like Outlander. I wanted to find books that could kind of scratch that itch because I'd read all the Outlander books. And this was one that came up on lots of different lists, and I had it for ages, didn't read it, and I was kind of, I think I picked it up, thankfully, because of the 52 Book Club Challenge, because I think there was one that needed like magical realism, and this has an element of magical realism to it. But this is about the main character, Eva, and she returns to Cornwall after her sister's passing. Cornwall is where she summered her whole life, all she can remember doing, summering there. And she's going back to spread her sister's ashes, and she's got kind of nothing left in the world. She's lost her parents, she's lost her sister, she's kind of got no ties. And this had a really interesting time travel element to it. If you know Outlander, you know that time travel's a big thing. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and it inspired me to go back to another series that I've partly read and start that from the beginning and actually give that its like full and finish that, because I never finished it. So it scratched the itch that I didn't know at this point needed scratching, if that makes sense. Like, albeit I've read all the Outlander books and I'd read a few other books that like Outlander, I hadn't read anything like that in a while. And yeah, it kind of spurred me on to get back into some of my other books that I have kind of maybe neglected, that were also potentially scratch itches for books like Outlander. And the last book on the list is unfortunately one that I haven't got to hand, but it is The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrian Young. This again was a book that got highly recommended because of its kind of being a similar book to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of being in a similar instance to the main character as well, because the main character finds out that she is seeing another time. She can see another time. She's getting flickers, she's getting glimmers, albeit she doesn't know that at that point. And just kind of being thrown into something that she doesn't really know where she is at. And also a little bit similar to Outlander in that sense. And then like figuring it all out alongside her, that was really interesting. Like as the reader, you were kind of trying to figure it out as well with the characters. And it was just amazing. And I think I'll read anything by Adrian Young now. I think she has got another book due out in 2025, which I need to do more research on. But that was just, again, scratched an itch I didn't know needed scratching with something similar to Addie LaRue. And it was just such an easy, albeit not kind of easy for the brain, because you're trying to piece bits together and you're kind of, oh, how's this all going to end up? How's this all going to work out? But it was just amazing. And I'm just really jealous of people that can write like that and write these amazing transportive stories. Like, I was there. So yeah, those were the top books of 2024, a few of the books that I read in 2024 and really enjoyed. Have you read any amazing books in 2024 that you'd like to tell me about? If so, please leave them down below in the comments. Or if you've read any of these books, not necessarily this year, but if you've read any of these books before or this year, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on them as well. But thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in my next one. Bye!